Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today in reading Freak the Mighty. So, we were asked to pick a childhood book that was one of our favorites. And a little secret is I did not read this as a child. I actually did not read this until last year when it was recommended to me because I wanted to read a few more stories to be able to share with my students for recommendations. And so I chose this one. I did not think that this would be a book that many of you would choose to pick up out of our library to read. It's an older story, but I feel like the message between friendship and accepting each other's differences is super powerful. And so I hope you enjoy reading this. So again, this is Freak the Mighty. Chapter 1, The Unvanquished Truth. I never had a brain until Freak came along and let me borrow his for a while. And that's the truth, the whole truth. The unvanquished truth is how Freak would say it. And for a long time, it was him who did the talking. Except I had a way of saying things with my fists and my feet, even before we became Freak the Mighty, slaying dragons and fools and walking high above the world. Called me kicker for a time. This was daycare, the year Graham and Grim took me over, and I had a thing about booting anyone who dared to touch me because they were always trying to throw a hug on me, like it was a medicine I needed. Graham and Grim, bless their pointed little heads, they're my mother's people, her parents. And they figured, whoa, better put this little critter with other little critters his own age, and maybe it'll improve his temper. Yeah, right. Instead, what happened? I invented games like kickboxing and kicking knees and kick faces and kick teachers and kick the other little daycare critters because I knew what a rotten lie that hug stuff was. Oh, I knew. This was when I got my first look at Freak, that year of the phony hugs. He didn't look so different back then. We were all of us pretty small, right? But he wasn't in the playroom with us every day. Just now and then he'd show up. Looking sort of fierce is how I remember him. Except later it was Freak himself who taught me that remembering is a great invention of the mind. And if you try hard enough, you can remember anything, whether it really happened or not. So maybe he wasn't really all that fierce in daycare, except I'm pretty sure he did hit a kid with his crutch once, whack that little brat, pretty good. And for some reason, little kicker never got around to kicking little Freak. Maybe it was those crutches that kept me from lashing out at him. Man, those crutches were cool. I wanted a pair for myself. And when little Freak showed up one day with these shiny braces strapped to his crooked legs, metal tubes right up to his hips, why, those were even more cool than crutches. I'm Robot Man, said Freak, or little Freak would go, making these weird robot noises as he humped himself around the playground, like he had robot motors inside of his legs, going, and this look, like, don't mess with me, man. Maybe I got a laser cannon hidden inside these leg braces, smoke a hole right through you. No question, Freak was hooked on robots back then. This little guy, 2 feet tall, and already he knew what he wanted. Then for a little time, I never saw Freak anymore. One day, he just came back to daycare, and the next thing I remember, I'm like in third grade or something, and I catch a glimpse of this yellow-haired kid scowling at me from one of those crippled vans. Man, they were death ray eyes, and I knew, hey, that's him, the robot boy. And it was like, whoa, because I had forgotten all about him. Daycare was a blank space in my head, and nobody had called me kicker for a long time. Mad Max, they were calling me, or Max Factor, or the one butthead in LD class called me MaxiPad until I persuaded him otherwise. Graham and Grim always called me Maxwell, though, which is supposed to be my real name, and sometimes I hated worst of all, Maxwell. Ugh. Grim out in the kitchen one night after supper whispered to Graham had she noticed how much Maxwell was getting to look like him, which is the way he always talked about my father, who had married his dear departed daughter and produced Eek Maxwell. Grim never says my father's name, just him, like his name is too scary to say. It's more than just the way Maxwell resembles him, Grim says, the night in the kitchen. The boy is like him. We'd better watch out. You never know what he might do while we're sleeping, like his father did. And Graham right away shushes him and says, don't ever say that, because little pictures have big ears, which makes me run to the mirror to see if my big ears are what make me look like him. What a butthead, huh? Well, I was a butthead because, like I said, I never had a brain until Freak moved down the street. The summer before 8th grade, right? The summer I grew so fast that Graham said we best let this boy go barefoot. He's exploding out of his shoes. The barefoot summer when I fell down a lot and the weirdo robot boy with his white yellow hair and his weird fierce eyes moved into the duplex down the block with his beautiful brown-haired mom, the fair Guinevere. Only a falling down goon would think that was her real name, right? Like I said, are you paying attention here? Because you don't even know how we got to be Freak the Mighty, which is pretty cool, even if I do say so myself. So it's a pretty short first chapter that kind of gives us a quick glimpse of our main characters, mostly Max. Couple questions I want you to kind of think about as you continue reading this, and mostly after this chapter. Couple of things are, what inferences can you make about Max's childhood based on what he's used in the text? And remember, to make an inference, we have to use what the book says and our background knowledge and add it together to make an educated guess. So kind of take some of those facts that he mentions and kind of think about what kind of childhood maybe he had. Also, maybe take some time with your family to analyze the language that Max uses. Think about how he describes himself and what does that tell us about how Max views himself as a person. And then as you continue to read the story, I know right now it's a little hard to answer, but as you continue reading the chapters, we get to know these characters a little bit more and the relationship that they create. I want you to think about how does being open-minded to diversity or differences create a common ground amongst others that kind of brings us together. That will be pretty relevant throughout the story, and I think this will, by the end, you'll be able to kind of see a lot of similarities about how we in general, even applying to our everyday life, can, if we're open to other people's differences, what kind of similarities and commonalities we can have. I really hope you stick with this book. I really enjoy it. I would love to hear some of your feedback as you're reading it. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Thank you for joining me tonight.